All right. Well, I've got my next guest here already. Sister Forbes. Sorry, Sister McAfee. I know another Camilla named Forbes. Sister McAfee, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well. How are you doing, Mazi?
I am excellent. I'm so grateful that you're here. Let me go ahead and read a couple of sentences from your bio.
Okay.
Camilla, as president and CEO of Wesley Housing, um, provides strategic direction and general executive leadership to the Wesley Housing. McAfee has held progressive leadership roles for award-winning organizations since 2008. Most recently serving as senior vice president of real estate development. She led Wesley's real estate redevelopment team through an unprecedented 5-year period of growth initiated by the successful award of 4 competitive funding projects in 2018. So you've been really very busy, Sister.
Just a little bit.
So you are you're my second segment today in a show about gentrification in Washington D.C. and what people are doing to either acquire property, maintain property, organizing with tenants. This is kind of the continuum of conversations I've been having. So can you talk to me a little bit about how you got into this work?
Sure, appreciate it. Yes, appreciate some of the introduction. Just to back up a little bit and maybe tell you a little bit more about Wesley Housing. We are a almost 50-year-old nonprofit affordable housing developer based in Northern Virginia, but been doing work in the district since 2016. Again, I myself have been in this work for quite some time, primarily on the real estate development and finance side of the business. And previously worked for the district at the Housing Finance Agency, and have been doing a lot of the work on behind the scenes in terms of financing a lot of the projects, but moved over into real estate development a number of years ago and led Wesley Housing through its most recent growth period. We have been in partnership with tenant associations in the district through the Tenant Opportunity to Purchase Act, that we can get into a little more detail about some of the benefits of that. But since we first entered the district in 2016, we have developed we currently own over 2,300 units of housing, of which we do property management as well as resident services, wraparound services for those developments. Those services that help support those communities include our housing stability work, our community engagement work, health and wellness services, as well as educational pieces that we help to support our residents. In the tenant opportunity to purchase partnerships with tenant associations, and this primarily we're talking about multifamily rental housing here. We are selected by the tenants who have the first right to purchase their buildings, but don't have necessarily, obviously, the developmental expertise or the financial capacity to do so. How they most likely execute that right is in partnership with real estate developers. And Wesley Housing, being a nonprofit developer, offers a number of benefits to those residents, which may include limiting rent increases, certainly includes non-displacement of those residents, non-involuntary displacement as a part of our development plan. Obviously, everyone still has to uphold their end of the contractual arrangement between landlord and tenant. But we have an intent not to involuntarily permanently displace residents. We utilize in-house relocation professionals who, when we have to do a renovation of a building, which may require temporarily relocating them, we do so in great consideration to the residents' needs. I'm going to pause there because I know I blurted out a lot, but I don't know where you might want to go with some of that detail.
No, so I guess one of the first questions is how does a tenant association engage with Wesley Housing?
Sure. So usually we're bought in through advocates and representation by the tenants. So we always want to make sure that the tenant association has their own representation because, they are entering into a real estate contract of sorts with us when we come in to do the development in partnership with them. And so usually it's the advocates, housing advocates such as housing counseling services and other legal aid services that represent the tenants will present an opportunity to a number of affordable housing, mission-oriented developers, such as our organization, and the tenants will, effectively interview us. We put together a proposal to them, and they make their selections accordingly, with that well-informed lens of what they want.
Does that generally mean, and this is my novice question, so does that really mean that what the tenant association is doing is using the Tenant Opportunity to Purchase Act to bring you in to become the new owner of the property?
Effectively, it is. But again, usually there is a community benefits or some kind of resident benefit agreement that we're entering into that they're holding us accountable for delivering to them. But yes, the value that we're bringing, obviously, again, is experience in development because most of these communities, some of them that we've taken over from former landlords who may not have been maintaining the building appropriately or treating the residents accordingly, right? That's usually when tenants in particular will really stand up and want to, make sure that their interests are protected. And so, there's an agreement that we come to about the things that are most important to that resident group that we agree to, but effectively we do become new ownership and new management agents.
And so ultimately, it sounds like this is a great strategy if, one, you as a set of tenants don't have the money as a group to be able to purchase the property, but two, if ultimately what you want is the things I heard you describe, things like rent control, access to greater services, etc., rather than having your building sold out from under you, you as a set of tenants organized to be able to basically not be displaced while someone who's interested in actually managing the property that you currently live in can come in as a partner with you to take advantage of the Tenant Opportunity to Purchase Act. Can you talk a little bit about the tenant? First off, is what I said accurate? And then can you talk about
it? Absolutely is, Mazi. And one of the things that we battle with sometimes, and sometimes the tenant group itself may have a challenge, is those folks that do want to come in and convert some of these historically, and we'll call them naturally occurring affordable housing. So they may not have restrictions, covenants on the property that says it needs to be maintained as affordable, but because of their age and condition, they have served as workforce housing in the city for quite some time. But because of this phenomena that I know that you're investigating further, gentrification takes place. People are coming in and they're forcing the values up. They may offer the residents what they call buyouts, for lack of a better terminology to it, to say, I'll pay you X number with a lot of zeros behind it to leave and never come back, unfortunately, right? And sometimes it's in the interest or, the best interest of that one tenant that's there today to take, that buyout. And I'll never, criticize someone for doing what they need to do that's the best for their family or their current condition. But what that does in our case, sometimes when you can't get enough factions of tenants that want to preserve it long-term for affordable, that then loses that asset for that affordable housing stock in the city. And it's really, really difficult, as you know, to build back new affordable housing. It's a little bit easier to retain and preserve what's already there.
Can you talk a little bit about this unprecedented 5-year period of growth?
Sure. Yeah, I'm pretty proud of it. In fact, I do enjoy creating great spaces in the environment. And one of the things I've been privileged to be a part of is, this growth with Wesley Housing. And we've pretty much touched on all the major jurisdictions in which we operate, which again includes Northern Virginia. So, we had a number of new construction and preservation projects going on in the city of Alexandria, Arlington County, Fairfax County, the district, as well as all the way out to Winchester, Virginia. So in the rural markets as well, which face the different challenges. And we were able to build almost 400 units and in total preserve and produce almost 700 units of housing over the last 5 years. That landed us on the nation's top 50 affordable housing developers in the country back in 2020. It's a designation that's hard to achieve, and I don't know if we'll replicate it in future years because you got to deliver a lot of units in one specific time frame, and our business is so cyclical. But we're pretty proud of that, to be recognized nationally as well as regionally through the Housing Association of Nonprofit Developers, HAND, here in the DC metro region.
If you're just tuning in, I'm talking to the CEO of Wesley Housing, Sister Kamilah McAfee. Quick. So I was asking this question about what is the Tenant Opportunity to Purchase Act in DC? That's my first. But my second question is, what is different in rural Virginia around affordable housing development? I'd love to learn about that as well.
Sure. So again, the Tenant Opportunity to Purchase Act, TOPA Act, as they call it, is a decades-long statute that sits on the DC books that allows any home or multifamily building that's being sold in the district has to be, when there's a bona fide third-party contract, it needs to be offered first to anyone who's renting out of that facility. So they have to have the ability to match that bona fide third-party contract, which can be extremely difficult depending on the type of asset that it is in the city to garner the financial resources as well as the experience that might be necessary to do the work that we do, which is the preservation and production of affordable housing. So we, of course, are utilizing federal and local resources in order to preserve and produce affordable housing. And in order to be able to effectively compete for those resources, you do need experience doing that work. In order to raise additional capital from the private markets to make those deals work. Differences out in rural jurisdictions, it may not come as any surprise, but of course, the construction cost and, the cost of land and the cost to construct is a little bit less out in those areas. But then they also, on a per capita basis, may have less resources from the local jurisdictions, right, in order to make that happen. They don't necessarily the problems, the varied challenges that they're trying to solve with public resources may not garner affordable housing on the top of the list as it can be and is been heightened in the urban markets, especially more recently during COVID, as it's become, more apparent that, everyone needs to have access to healthy spaces. And so, it has, just different sets of challenges, as you can imagine, everything does.
So you're one of the few people I've talked to on this show that is not a founder. So you're the CEO of Wesley Housing, but this is not something that you created. Can you tell me what was happening 50 years ago that led to the founding of this nonprofit?
I appreciate you asking that question, Mazi, because it's something I should have led with, and I usually do when I talk about who we are. So Wesley Housing, and if you're familiar at all with the Methodist Church, when you hear the name Wesley or John Wesley, you usually they make that connection. But we are founded out of the roots of the United Methodist Church. And the Methodists do have a long-standing history of addressing social justice issues through ministry. And in the mid-70s in Northern Virginia, which again is where we were originated and based, there was a urban consultation study that had indicated, the top 7 issues of the day of being challenges in the communities that the Methodists wanted to serve. And housing, affordable housing in particular, safe and sustainable affordable housing was at one of those at the top of the list. And former school teacher, as typically comes out of church ministry, one and all can participate and serve. A former school teacher who had no background in real estate development or management or anything, decided to take on that charter of initiating addressing the affordable housing need in Northern Virginia. And the first property that we developed at the time was born out of a donation from one of the church members. Again, another way in which things, get done and get generated is, joining folks that are committed to the mission and have the resources. And, it went from there. So some of our expansion went from there.
So I'm curious because most people in a field, know who their co-operators are instead of your competitors, the people who are competing with you to do good, who are you could say are your co-opetition. Who are some of the other organizations in this space that maybe our listeners should be aware exist?
Sure, absolutely. There are a tremendous number of nonprofit and for-profit developers in this space doing the good work. Jubilee Housing is one. Manna Housing in DC is one. The Community Builders is a national. Preservation of Affordable Housing is another national. Michael's group. All these folks are doing work on varying scales in the district right now, some at much larger scales and some, at the scale in which we operate, which is probably, 50 to 100 units at a time, 150 units at a time, and, in buildings, and some are creating whole mixed use communities. There's a long list.
Well, during that 5-year growth spurt, you all added, as you said, 571 units representing $231 million in total development costs. But you also said, I'm not sure if we're going to make that list because of what growth is going to look like over the foreseeable future. What do you see in terms of the next cycle around a need for affordable housing?
Well, the need hasn't been greater. The need is tremendous. There's a regional study that says that we need to create over 320,000 units of housing, and 75% of that needs to be affordable to folks at the AMI area median income levels that we serve. The need is tremendous. The mayor has the commitment to deliver 36,000 units, 12,000 of which need to be affordable, and we're happy to be able to be a contributor to that. The resources and the economic environment that we operate in are the challenges that really are in front of us in terms of meeting that need. So by resources, again, we do a layer cake or a lasagna or whatever you want to call it, of capital stack of resources, so that we can make rents where the market rents are plus 2,000 a unit over in most areas in the city, that we can have rents below 1,200 per unit, and still that can be a challenge for folks depending on what income levels they're at. So in order to make that happen, we have to have local resources from the city, both in that upfront capital as well as ongoing subsidies, rent subsidies, Section 8 and the like, local rent subsidies in the district as well. And then we also need to be able to leverage those local resources into what they call low-income housing tax credits. That's the predominant premier production tool for affordable housing in the country right now. And that gets us capital from the banking institutions and other types of investors in the work that we do. And of course, they get a lot of benefits for, investing in this type of work. But the resources, the outlook for those resources is what's concerning, right? The cost of capital, the cost of construction, and the increased demand on local dollars for other things.
Is there, as we get ready to wrap up, is there anything unique about what's happening in DC related to affordable housing? And I'm asking in part because of things like the mayor's goal to eliminate homelessness by mostly collaborate, to the best of my knowledge, collaborating with nonprofits. We're able to provide housing to folks that are currently unhoused. There's also pushes for things like artist housing, which is another kind of affordable housing. And I've also seen kind of mixed income properties in particular neighborhoods like Noma, where there's affordable housing right next to the very expensive housing in the same building. Is
Mm-hmm.
that unique to DC, or are there things that are unique to DC?
I don't necessarily think that the concepts are completely unique. It's not happening everywhere, let's say, but there are other areas in the country in which they're focused on artist housing and then homelessness, of course, and those types of priorities. What I would say is unique is the level at which the mayor has committed to funding those those needs. In historically, I know there was a big cut to the Housing Production Trust Fund this year, again because of those other competing priorities post COVID that you have to balance. But historically, on a per capita basis, no other jurisdiction has invested in affordable housing the way the District of Columbia does. So, that is absolutely commendable. But, on the flip side, it has been to help stem and combat the fact that it was from 2000 to like 2015 or so, it had the highest rate of gentrification in the nation as well. So, yes, we're putting a lot of dollars into it, and trying to, make sure that we can maintain and preserve what we have and build more. But, it's still a lot of catch up to do.
I know I said that was my last question. I have one more, which is what's the runway? Like if a tenant association contacts your company today, how long does it take for, on average, for you all to enter into an agreement? Yeah.
Well, enter into initial agreement doesn't necessarily take a long time, maybe a couple of months or so to draft and negotiate that, and for the tenants to decide that they want to enter into partnership with us. The back end of transactions, as you might imagine, as you watch development, especially of affordable housing around the city, it can be a little bit longer, right? So, in order to, there are statutory requirements we need to meet to acquire the property. And the district does have resources that they garner to make sure, we can preserve those naturally occurring affordable housing units. And so that time to acquire the property and take over ownership can be about a year, a little bit less, sometimes, but about that time frame, 9 to 12 month time frame. And then we have to, again, compete for those resources in order to do the rehabilitation of a project. And so that's where timelines get a little bit longer, depending on if we're successful the first time.
If someone's interested in learning more about how to enter into a partnership, what do they do in terms of email, website, that kind of stuff?
Yeah, absolutely. So www.wesleyhousing.org is our website. They certainly can feel free to reach out to me directly, kmcafee@whdc.org. Or they can reach out to my vice president of real estate development, who I'd likely put them in touch with as well, Jay Cabelli, Cabelli @whdc.org. And
Kamilah McAfee, thank you so much for joining me for this segment today. We've learned so much.
Thank you so much for having me, Mazi. I really appreciate it, and I appreciate the work that you're doing.
Not a problem. All right, everybody, we're about to go ahead and take a break for the news and maybe a PSA in advance. You're listening to Something to Say.